some magic somehow.
Sounds fun.
We are back live here on our world-famous Jiggy Jaguar radio broadcast. You can find us on Periscope and, of course, Facebook Live, iHeartRadio, and 50-plus AM/FM stations across the country and around the world. And I have got a fabulous guest with us today. Ralph Sutton is with us. He joins us on the old Skype, the old Skype-a-rooney. And Ralph is a longtime veteran of television and radio. He's got a built-in international following. And how are you, sir?
I'm okay. Is that what they send you? It says
that's what they sent me.
What a crappy intro that is. I'm sorry about that.
No. I love it.
I'm going to have to talk to somebody about that.
Yeah. You'll have to have to find somebody, and we'll have to send out a press release or something. I don't know.
Hell will be raised, Jiggy.
There we go. So, you have been doing radio and TV and everything for a heck of a long time. Talk to me.
It's a very nice way of saying I'm old. Thank you.
No. How did you get into the business, my friend?
It's great. Story is that I didn't start here, but for one point, I used to run rock clubs in New York. I was running dance clubs and rock clubs, but then I was a DJ at a strip club in New Jersey.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I worked at a lot of the big ones over the years, but I was in Jersey at the time, and a guy was on the air, was on before me. He worked 12 to 7, and I worked 7 to close. And I could just tell he had a great voice, and he really had a good command of the room, but he didn't know what he was doing as a strip club DJ. So I asked him, what's your story here? And he was a radio guy that just was doing this part-time. And I said, I'll make you a deal. You get me an interview there, and I'll show you how to do this. And then him and I ended up working together for almost like 5 years. That's where I started my radio career. I did overnights for a while at a little station in Jersey, but then started a syndicated rock radio show called The Tour Bus.
Yes,
that
indeed.
got to about 100 stations, and I did that most of my adult life until I started my podcast.
Well, I'll tell you, I remember running the tour bus on a station in Salina, Kansas, 92.7 The Zoo.
I remember that. That's cool. What's funny about that is that I always thought it was Selena, and then someone, and I know this is radio, so I don't want to curse, but can you say the female anatomy that starts with V? Are you allowed to say that word?
Oh, yes, because that's all. One of the things about Kansas, of course, I'm originally from McPherson, Kansas, and everybody calls it McPherson. And so the big gimmick when I was growing up was there's no fear in McPherson. And in Salina, we used to have these, bands come through, and I used to do this thing called Jiggy Jag TV out at a local rock club called the Blue Goat, of all places. And I don't know why it was called the Blue Goat, but the Blue Goat, and we would have bands come through, and they would always say Salina. And there was one day they said, no, it's Salina, like vagina.
Right,
and so everyone was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, the first time you guys came on as a syndicated affiliate, I kept saying it's Selena, and then I got a bunch of emails that said, "No, idiot, it's Selena like vagina," and I never forgot it after that.
That is fantastic. We've got Ralph Sutton with us today. Of course, you've got all sorts of things going on, and talk to me about your latest project that you're involved in.
Well, I mean, there's a few. It's amazing how the world has changed. For me, radio was my dream, and there's nothing like what you're doing. Live radio, to me, is the art form that I miss the most. No matter what part of my career, I don't know if you have a delay here, but the no delay live radio I used to do, that energy, like if the band doesn't show up at the time they're supposed to be in studio, we're screwed the rest of the show.
That's right. You've got to, as the great Tom Likas used to say, you've got to vamp.
Yeah, and not only that, the idea that, a show that starts at 8 and ends at 10 or whatever, who cares? But that top of the hour, you had 5 seconds to hit that top of the hour ID. And when you're syndicated across the country at the time and live everywhere, one screwed up everybody.
Yes.
So that energy was nuts. But for me personally, the money started to dwindle. And even though we were still on a bunch of stations, syndicated radio was dying because the only thing that survives is what you're doing. Live and local is what's going to make radio survive.
Yes.
So I started a podcast about 5 years ago called SDR Show, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. Although now we're saying it stands for social distancing required, but it's SDR Show, right? And I started that as a joke saying, imagine 1,000 people would listen to me. How great would that be? And now here we are 5 years later. It's about 100,000 listeners or more. And it led to me starting a network called Gas Digital. And Gas Digital now has 22 shows. I think it's 4 or 5 million listeners a week. We have people like, if you're a rock fan, Jamie Josta from Hatebreed, Rob Flynn from Hatebreed, Jamie Josta. I'm screwing it up. Let's start that again. Jamie Josta from Hatebreed, Rob Flynn from Machine Head both have shows on the network.
Yes.
Michael Bisping from the UFC is on the network.
That's awesome.
And then a bunch of great comedians. It's just a really cool energy, a lot of great shows, and my show's one of them. And collectively, it's built into this monstrosity that is Gas Digital Network, that we have 22 shows that are all happening. There's shows happening every single day.
Fantastic. Well, I may need to talk to you about seeing what we can do about getting a show on there. Who knows?
Sure.
So you, before you did, or besides doing the radio and the podcast, you hosted rock events across the country.
Still do some of them. I don't do as many now because I'm old, and I turn them down because the way I look at it is this: like, there's one that I host every year for 11 years called Shiprocked, which is rock cruise, the M3 Rock Festival, the big motorcycle rally, Sturgis, a bunch of others. But as I got older and I was doing some of them for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, I said, there's some 22-year-old kid that would give his left arm to be the host.
Oh, you better believe it.
And I'm doing it almost out of like, all right, here we go again. So I decided to cut down the things that I'm doing to to kind of keep that rock torch going. And nobody would see a 50-year-old dude on stage. Like, bring some young, hungry kid out there. So I kind of dwindled off a lot of them, but I still love Shiprock. They took 1 year off Shiprock, but I think I'm going to go back next year.
You're the only, we need to put you in a museum next to the chick that doesn't give blowjobs, because you're one of the very few radio guys who went, I'm old. I need to figure something else out. There are so many radio guys, and you've got a list. I've got a list. Everybody that's listening's got a list. They will never give up that spot.
Yeah, I just felt like
they'll never give that spot up.
I feel it does a disservice to the fan base if you're going there
that too,
as opposed to going there and being like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Being that id, that id inside everybody, like, holy crap, look at what's happening right now. I get to enjoy this as much as you. The days I stopped sitting front row and center after I went on stage to watch the bands was like, realize, oh wow, I don't care anymore. This is not a good thing, So that's when I started looking to. And also, by the way, a very funny story, Jiggy, is that when I was doing the M3 Rock Fest and I had my radio show tour bus, the first couple years I was there, in that backstage radio tent area where they put you, the closer you are to the stage, the more important you are. So it was that local rock station in position 1, and my show was almost always in position 2, and then there'd be a bunch of other things.
Yes.
By year 4 or 5, I was the last one on the row because nobody cared about syndicated radio anymore.
Yep.
And positions 2 and 3 were all online music zines and podcasts. And I'm like, I need to figure this out.
The one thing I think is so great about, by the way, we're speaking with a great guest today. Ralph Sutton is with us. He's a longtime veteran of television and radio. He hosted the Tour Bus, nationally broadcast rock radio program, which was syndicated in 50 markets. He has got all sorts of different things he's doing now. That the Shiprocked MC duties. I had a photographer years and years ago who went to several of these events. Mr. Michael Nagy just absolutely loved Shiprocked, and he would always tell me, "Oh man, you gotta go to Shiprocked sometime." He's just like this rabid, and in wrestling they call him wrestling marks. He was a rock and roll mark. But Ralph, one of the things that you hit on there, with the fact that you were positioned, 1 or 2, and then you were at the back of the line.
Yeah.
Radio, and I notice this a lot with radio. I don't really notice this a lot with TV, but the radio things, it's an odd deal because, like with PR people, when I talk to PR people, they love the fact we're on iHeart. They love the fact that it's a syndicated show and we're on all these, little AM, FM stations across the country. And I had to get used to knowing when to tell people certain things because, like, if I talk to some PR people in the music industry, I'm trying to get an interview with whoever, they love the fact we're on iHeart. But then I talk to some radio people, and they love the fact we're a podcast too. And right. I'm like, they just don't understand.
It's crazy and funny. The thing that I do is that depending on who I talk to, my podcast is either called the SDR Show, which sounds politically correct, or the Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll Show.
That's right.
Who I'm pitching it to. And then if they ask, I'll tell them.
Yes.
But, in general, let them do their homework. It's not my job to do your homework if you didn't look it up.
That's right.
But in general, it's true. Like, I remember that feeling of when the station that was my flagship for a tour bus for many, many years was called WDHA in New Jersey.
Yes.
And they were the rock station of Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I walked into that studio, and those first few years too, the awe I would feel like, oh my God, I'm in these studios, these radio studios. Like, it meant so much to me.
Oh, yes.
And my original feeling, my co-host for SDR is a really funny comedian, Big Jay Oakerson.
Oh, yes, Big Jay. Right? He's fantastic.
And he pitched the idea of us doing a podcast together on Shiprock because we were hosting events together. And I actually got him on Shiprock because they needed a rock comic, and I knew him and booked him on the show, on the cruise. But my first response to him 6 years ago was, dude, podcasting is for people that can't do radio. I'm doing radio. Podcast, right?
Yeah.
And then a year later, the next Shiprock, I said, dude, I've been hearing about like guys like Joe Rogan and Mark Maron and all this stuff. And you know what? F it. Let's do a podcast together. And the name of the show, the logo, the URL, I had it all already because I was going to do a morning radio show 7-8 years ago called SDR Show. And my idea was I'm going to go out at night and party in New York City. And whoever's with me at 6 a.m. is coming on the show with me.
That is fantastic.
And I could do this for a year, maybe 2, but it would be a crazy, crazy time.
Oh, it would be the craziest thing.
But
yes.
At the time they told me the money, I was like, it's not enough for me to like totally ruin my life for 2 years. It just didn't work for me. But I kept everything on my hard drive, the imaging, the bumper, I had everything ready to go. So then when Jay said, what do we call it? I sent him like a complete package.
Ready to go, baby.
Yeah. He's like, well, let's do it. And that's how we started the show.
Yes, because radio people, it used to be, Opie and Anthony and Howard Stern and all these guys used to be like, oh, nobody's going to do podcasts. Nobody's going to do this internet radio stuff. Oh, that's all for the guys who can't hack it.
Right.
And then the radio business fell apart. And Tom Likas all of a sudden became an internet sensation. And Opie and Anthony, Anthony Cumia's built like an entire studio somewhere. Joe Rogan's got, that giant monstrosity thing that he's got out there in L.A. There's all sorts of things going on. So now all of a sudden, we've all changed it. And now all the radio guys are here, and the future is now. And
but the funny thing is this, I'll tell you this, which is beautiful for you and I, is that most of these networks and most of these people, they don't understand the platform of audio entertainment.
Yes.
Right? So maybe they're very funny or whatever, but they don't understand what a TSL is or how to keep those numbers up or anything like that. So you go in and you're ahead of the game. So like even the best example I could give you is last couple of months ago, I was in LA and through a friend of a friend, I went into Joe Rogan Studios to help them wire some audio equipment because they didn't know how to do it.
They didn't know how to do it. Nope.
So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that years of doing live radio, there were times where I'm swapping out pots live on air in between because something went down and we're unplugging and pulling things back and forth. The wiring and the live stress that you and I are accustomed to would break a podcaster.
Oh, yeah. these guys, they that's like, the things that I always one of my great friends in internet radio and podcasting is Frank Catolo, who used to be Mars Catolo on the Wolfman Jack program.
Oh, wow.
And Frank basically started the very first internet radio talk show. And
Cool.
he started doing Skype calls and all these different things. And when Mark Maron came along, it just made him so angry because Maron gets all this accolades. Oh my God, Mark Maron's doing all these amazing things. and Frank's like, I did it in the early 90s.
That's crazy. That's really funny. I never heard that. That's really cool. And also, what's interesting, again, with you and I talk to podcasters, and they do so much post-production editing.
Oh, yes.
I'm like, why? Like,
why
if
do you
just do it?
See, that's always, well, that's like Frank's thing. Frank has always done a live show Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's what he does. He does his show, and then at the end of it, he uploads it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like all these, I see all these videos, or I see like this Todd Cochran who started this thing called Blueberry years and years ago. He's like Mr. Podcast. And they always talk about all this editing. And I'm like, what are you doing with all this editing? So I'm so glad to hear someone like you. A real radio person come in and say, what are you doing with all this editing and post-production?
There's one guy I was talking to who takes out all the breaths. I'm like, what?
Oh, yeah.
You have a 60-minute capacity in your voice?
When I first started there at 92.7 way back in the day, one of our program director, Brother Ken at the time, used to always, when he showed me how to use Cool Edit, he's like, you got to go through and you got to do the ad, then you got to take all the breaths out. And I'm like, okay, well, that's cool for production purposes. Yeah. And then all these guys now are taking the breaths out on their podcast. I'm like, what are you doing, boys?
It's insane. I love, by the way, that you were the board op for my show 100 years ago.
Yes, I think that is amazing.
Did you know that going into this interview or no?
No, I did not.
Wow. That's so cool.
When your press person got a hold of me, she's like, I got all these people, and she starts sending me all this stuff, and I start looking through things, and I've had so many guests today because, of course, I'm busier now than I was because everybody's home.
Right, oh, for sure.
So we're doing all these interviews, and so I was thumbing through your stuff here, and I'm like, holy shit. So I think that's awesome. So what the concept of the SDR show, and building this network, talk to me about that process, because I know all sorts of different people who have tried this in the past where they're like, well, I've got a show and I've got 5 or 6 guys that I know. We're going to put a network together, and then it never goes anywhere.
Well, I think that again, not to keep touting my past, but what made the difference was doing syndicated radio, having a show on 70, 80 stations.
Yes.
Is basically the same methodology of having 20 shows on one network. It's just the reverse of the same model, So yeah. I understood how to figure out our audience, how to part monies based on where they were coming from and things like that. When we first started, I was on a network called All Things Comedy, which is a great comedy network, yes. But they had no ad infrastructure. And at the time, I did both radio and my podcast for like 2 years, and then let the radio show go about a year and a half, 2 years ago. But I said to them, hey, look, my ad sales team for radio could sell the network easily, and everybody can make money. And their response was, well, we wouldn't know how to figure out how to disperse the money, so I'd rather not do it. I'm like, you're saying no to it's an Excel sheet. I'll show you how to do it. I want to do it. So having those concepts already baked into my brain made it a lot easier. Same thing with our ad sales department. Most ad sales people are older. They're from the old radio days.
Oh, you better believe it.
So I know how to train people to talk to those people and make them understand podcasting, if that makes any sense. So it was easier leap for us to do it because of that.
The one thing I always liked when Lycus started doing his show is he went out and printed, and I even stole this concept because it was genius. He would print business cards, and on the back of the business card, he would teach you how to download the TuneIn app.
Oh, that's
and
great.
Find
that's
his
really
show. Cool. And he was always like, listeners, whatever. He goes, I've got this on our website. Just go print them, and just go hand them to people.
I'm a big fan. I tell people all the time, social symmetry. So you should have the same handle on all the platforms.
Oh yes, one of my I guess I'll say somebody that I've been tutoring over the years. He's Mr. Andrew Duncan. Years and years ago, he decided, well, he couldn't find Andrew Duncan this or Andrew Duncan that, so he just changed his whole thing to Drew Duncan. And there was one day I had hooked him up with an ESPN affiliate somewhere, and he was doing afternoon radio, and of course that didn't really go anywhere. He's found more success doing what we're doing. Than he has. But that was his thing, was he would get on and he would say Drew Duncan across all Facebook, Twitter, all that, and he was always Drew Duncan.
Right.
And so, yeah, you've hit that on the head. None of this underscore, none of this.
No. And even if it's underscore Drew Duncan, then be underscore Drew Duncan everywhere. But still, you could, if you can't come up with like me, I am Ralph Sutton. That's mine, at I am Ralph Sutton.
Yes.
And I am RalphSutton.com, because I couldn't get Ralph Sutton. It was taken, right, when I first started looking. So then the SDR show, sure, it would have been cool if it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but that was taken. So the SDR show, we took that. So it's just a matter of figure it out. There's a website called like Name Check, and you just type in what you're looking for, and it will show you which platform it's on. And when you get that combination that's available everywhere, that's the one you take.
Fantastic. I what was it? Probably about a month ago, Joe Rogan had someone on his podcast, and they were talking about radio, and they're like, "You're still doing radio?" and one of my heroes, although I listened to his show the other day for the first time in a while, and I'm like, oh my God, he's still doing the same shtick he was doing years ago. Man Cow out of Chicago.
Oh, yeah, I know Man Cow.
And he's still doing the same thing. And I'm like, oh my God, really?
Radio is owned by older people that are out of touch. Like, I remember, boy, I don't mean to crap on radio so much, but I do
that all the time here.
But like, so if you'll remember when they tried, when iPods first came out.
Yes.
And everybody could put thousands of songs on their devices before it was integrated into a phone.
Yep.
Radio started panicking, so they made this idiotic format called the Jack.
Oh, what's funny is here's more craziness from my past. But 92.7 The Zoo, which had your show, the tour bus. At one point, they did the Arbitron ratings for the first time in that area of Kansas. And 92.7 The Zoo, #1 with a bullet. We were the #1 rock station. We were the #1 radio station. A month later, the owners came in and said, we're getting rid of this format. We're going to sports. And they shifted Brother Ken and myself to a ill-conceived morning show on a Jack FM station.
It's so ridiculous.
And this Jack FM, we had a Bob format and previous. And the Bob format on this one station, on this 95.5 station, what they had turned the imaging into, and they always used to get really mad when I called him this, but they made Bob out to be sort of like a mentally handicapped kid. They hated that. They hated the way I used that term, but it was always, Bob likes butterflies, Bob FM, or Bob sees you out the window, hi, Bob FM. And he was such a cute little guy. We had little kids come down to the station, want to meet Bob.
Oh, boy.
And there was all these things. Well, then they decided they were going to switch to Jack. I'm assuming it was a cheaper format.
Right. Also, somebody in the higher ups at like a Clear Channel or a Beasley or whatever decided we're going to put a bunch of money into this format.
And all of a sudden, this Jack FM, and I don't know if it was just our imaging or if it's just the way Jack was, Jack FM went from being the nice little retarded boy to the redneck trailer guy. It was, we don't care what you want to hear, this Jack FM. And they're like, we're in the trailer park, Jack FM. And I'm like, I don't have any interest in this.
Right. It was horrible. And I remember them saying, it's like listening to your iPod. I'm like, no, it's not. My iPod has my music on it. It's like listening to your iPod, you idiot. And, of course, it failed miserably because it's like, instead of trying to program against technology, radio needs to program to what their strengths are, which is live, local entertainment. Get someone who really has a connection to that neighborhood, because podcasting can't do that. Web radio can do that. Live and local, where the local bands, the local restaurants, the local everything. And that's what you talk about, and you'll be number one in your market. Who cares if someone in Iowa doesn't listen to someone in Kansas or whatever it is? If you're connecting to your market, that's all that matters.
You know what's funny about this? We've got Ralph Sutton with us today. Of course, he is a longtime veteran of television and radio. He has got as his press person says, his own built-in international fan base. He hosted for many years the Tour Bus, a nationally rock radio show. It was syndicated in 50 markets across the nation and rebroadcast worldwide on the internet. And he currently hosts the SDR Show with Big Jay Oakerson, which, by the way, is fantastic. Big Jay is pretty damn amazing. And it's been the number one spot on comedy in iTunes. And he's gotten the top 20 iTunes comedy as well. Just amazing things. But, Ralph, one of the things that I've heard on radio, and I always, whenever I hear these things on local radio, I'm always like, oh, local radio's not doing itself any favors. I heard a guy the other day on a station in Wichita called T95. They're supposedly a rock station. They don't play a lot of rock, but they're a rock station. And he kept talking about how he wanted someone to go to their website and look up his Spotify playlist.
Okay.
And I'm like, what are you doing? Why aren't you sending people to Spotify?
That's really funny. He's driving traffic away from his radio station. That's really cool. I like that.
You know, I just find that so strange because I'm like, once I go to Spotify, why would I go back to T95?
Yeah, once you realize, but it's funny, again, it's just stick with what makes you great. Not only that, like, they did a survey just a few years ago. The most owned appliance on the planet is a radio.
Yes.
Everybody has a couple of radios.
Everybody's got a radio.
Yeah, so why would you not cater to that audience? I don't know. It upsets me because I love this platform so much, but it just, for me personally, it wasn't paying the bills anymore.
Lycus used to say that he has no problem with the appliance. He loves radio. He just can't stand the radio business. And one of the things I find so strange about radio also, I always love talking radio with radio people, especially people like Ralph, who understands the business and isn't just going to be telling me hyper-local and all this other nonsense and giving me all these buzz terms like morning mare and, what are some of the other radio terms that live and local?
TSL is my favorite because that really means a lot. It does mean a lot. The idea of how long the time someone spends listening, I think, is a great idea. And the thing that I embraced was that when we did a metric on that once for my show, and we had the highest TSL. Most people that were listening to SDR made it through 85% of it at least, and that's incredible.
Look at that!
Wow, it's amazing. It's like something like 90% of them listen to 85% of it or more, which is unbelievable.
This is awesome. Look at that. I like the fact that you've got a sales team. You study metrics. You've got all these things. This is the one thing that radio has always missed.
Because we can get real metrics. When you log into your back end, you could see not only how many listens, like we just did with radio was dumb. For a while, it was journals, which was the idiot.
Oh, the journals or the coverage maps.
Yeah, it's all so stupid. Like a journal, I'm going to say that I listen to classical music all day because I want to sound smart or whatever it is. Or for the $1 or $5 they were giving you for filling out a journal for 2 weeks, what are you going to get? You're not going to get some billionaire to do it. It's just going to be people who need the $5. It really was a dumb setup. But with podcasting, you can see not only how long they're listening, but where they're listening from, what states. You can't drill down a city, but you can drill down a state. And then if you bring in YouTube, you start getting male and female demographic. You could really get a real audience.
And see, this is the thing that we years ago started doing, and I got a lot of people either that were in radio or not in radio that told me how much of an idiot I was, but which is fine. I've been told that by radio people and TV people forever. But we would do our podcast. We would stream the show live off our website. I had a Twitch channel. We're on Facebook. We're on Periscope. We're anywhere that you can be. I want to be there.
Right, exactly. You want to be where they're looking for you. It was a famous David Lee Roth quote. I know the Van Halen record is going to be in New York, but I want it to be in Snohomish, Washington. Then you know that any kid that's going to look for it is going to find it,
Yes.
and that's how to have a platinum record.
The one thing, like you were mentioning, what we were talking earlier about the guy sending people to Spotify. Another one of the things that I've loved about radio over the years is the fact that the radio owners, they're not really paying too much attention to things. So you get like Alex Jones will get on the air, and he'll be like, Infowars.com. And then you have, Rush Limbaugh was talking about, well, if you want commercial-free Ditto Cam, you can go to rushlimbaugh.com. And I started listening to all this, and I thought, these guys are geniuses because they're sending their audiences to the website.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, by the way, that's why I did my radio show for 2 more years, was because all I did every episode was talk about my podcast.
It's great, and they're not paying attention because they don't.
If you were a manager of any station, like now, DHA, which is I still have friends that work there, they told them that they would get fired if they talked about a podcast on the air.
Oh yeah. I've heard folks that have seen those memos as well.
Still, again, I don't know. Like you can argue both sides of that coin, but I understand radio right now. It's just a different animal. It's just you have to figure out how to work within the confines of being 2020. It's not it's not 1997 anymore. So you got to figure it out.
Well, I have noticed that radio people, especially like news directors and things, they still want, like, I'll apply for news director jobs every once in a while just to see what kind of craziness is going on out there. And they'll tell me, well, I want to see some of your writing. And I'm like, okay, you do know we're on the radio and we have the ability to do Periscope and Facebook Live, and I could report from the scene.
But what were they writing? What were they asking you to write?
News writing for their website.
That's crazy. But I mean, that's also, though, indicative of the times, because I remember when I was at DHA, there was a program director, an assistant program director, a music director, and an assistant music director. And then as you get on and they'll realize half those jobs mean nothing.
Yes.
There's one guy that's the program director, music director, and afternoon drive guy, because there's not that kind of money anymore.
My favorite is the people that will like there are certain radio groups like iHeartRadio is real big on this. They'll have these help wanted ads, and they want you to go to their job bank. And I'm like, okay, you want me to fill out all this stuff, upload all this stuff? Does anybody ever see those?
Well, good question. Yeah, I have no idea.
Or my favorite is every year we go out and interview the adult film stars out at the porn expo in Las Vegas every January.
I'm sure that's really difficult to go through.
And on the way out there every year, I always will see like radio ads or things, or people need this or need that, so I'll send them something, and they'll be like, "Well, when you're in town, could you come by and pick up a paper application?" I'm like, "What? We're still doing that in 2020?"
That's really funny. It's so antiquated. It's hilarious. It really is. It's funny.
Yes.
When Tourbus first started, we signed a syndication deal, and this is in 1999.
Yes.
Okay, and I thought, oh, you sign a syndication deal, you are a millionaire. That's just what happens.
Yes. Because you think of Rush and Hannity and all these guys.
Yeah, or Stern or whatever. Right,
Yeah.
that's it. I just signed this deal, and then money just starts coming. And it took me 3 or 4 months to realize, oh, we are syndicatable, but we're not syndicated. So we have the ability for people to take our show, but no one's taking the show, because why would they? Who the hell knows who I am, right? So the first 3 months, nothing happens. And then one day I said to my old co-host, here's what we're doing. The show ends Saturday night at midnight. We are getting in your truck. We are driving to Miami. On the way down, we're just going to keep churning radio stations to find anybody playing the kind of music we play. Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, Motley Crue, Van Halen. And we'll take a list of those stations.
Yeah.
We get to Miami. We took a crappy hotel. We just started making phone calls, made 12 meetings, drove back up the East Coast, came back with 5 affiliates in 1 week, and then got back in time to do the show that Saturday night a week later.
Look
called
at
my
that.
company. I said, how did I sign 5 stations in a week when I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and you've got nothing for 3 months?
That's awesome. Well, I'll tell you, it's because you're a workhorse, brother.
I tried.
So, what do you make of the fact that rock stations and classic rock stations, and we're now referring to Huey Lewis and the News as classic rock and classic hits and all these formats?
Yeah, I mean, eventually you knew, like when that was the basis. The original name of the tour bus was Modern Classics. Okay, it's
Yes.
crappy, but the concept was when I was a kid, classic rock was Led Zeppelin and the Beatles.
Yes.
And now I'm an adult, and classic rock is still Led Zeppelin and the Beatles.
And the Beatles.
It makes no sense. So I said everything needs to shift one. Everything is now it's 20 years later, and you're still considering Led Zeppelin classic rock, but Guns N' Roses is not getting any airplay. And that was the concept of the show originally. So it's the modern classics. It's the classics for the next generation. And how I figured that whole thing out, that people were missing that, was as though the DJ in a strip club, I'd throw on Guns N' Roses and the place would go crazy, because this is before the internet, before Spotify. You couldn't hear those CDs anywhere. If you didn't own it, it wasn't coming on the radio. There was nowhere to hear it. And that was how we started the show. And that was the tagline to my packet that I presented to the station was, how many times can you hear Stairway to Heaven and not want to blow your brains out? And that's the start.
That's awesome. So, with you being in all facets of radio and have done all the different things you've done, what do you make of the success of some of these shows like Alice Cooper and Dee Snider?
To me, well, Dee is a friend, but what it is very simple.
Originally, Dee Snider tried to do morning radio, and everybody's like, I don't want to hear that crap. And then he's
for a while.
Yeah.
What I think is that those shows, even I think Nikki Sixx gave up his show. Is that right? I forget.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. They are all owned by the corporations,
of course,
right? That own the radio stations, and
course.
it's just they're double dipping. So they're making money on the radio station, and then they're getting the syndication money from the syndicated show. So they're making both advertising money. They can pull it on both sides. My show was the most successful independently owned show. We weren't only on Clear Channel or Beasley or Cumulus.
Yeah.
We had a couple of affiliates from all the different ones because we were independent and we didn't have to just be like, when I worked at when our show, one of the things that hurt Tour Bus a lot was when Nikki Sixx's show came out, stations were being forced to take that show.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, we don't want it, but we have no choice, so we got to let you go. And that's how we lost a lot of affiliates that way. So most of these, if you look at like even Dee's show is owned by Premiere or whatever.
Yes,
one of those.
I think so. I think it's a Premiere radio property.
Right, and Dee gets paid a salary to be the voice,
Yep.
A little more or less depending on how many stations it's on. But we were a different animal. What's funny is when we first started, we were on a small station called WNNJ that no one ever heard of. It was in like South Jersey. And good luck getting interviews from anybody important because we were on 10 to midnight on a Sunday just in one station. Nobody cared, right? Fair enough. Nobody cares. So I found a store in New York that had 20 great interview CDs from famous rock stars. Guns N' Roses, Van Halen, Motley Crue, whatever. Just got lucky, bought them all, isolated the answers, and then just asked questions. And so for 20 weeks, we had the best guests in the world. Like, how the hell is this station getting Axl Rose?
I did that one time when I filled in for Brother Ken on 92.7 The Zoo doing the morning show one time when he decided, I'm not coming to work. He called me at 5, and he's like, and at the time they wouldn't let me be Jiggy because I had created Jiggy. I had to be Crash Davis. But, which I turned Crash Davis into a really bad Greaseman impression. I don't know if you remember the Greaseman from...
Yeah, of course.
I was always like, Lingalangare, all that. And we had this Premiere Radio Prep, and they had these interview things where you could download, like, William Shatner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I did that one day, and I was like, I'll do this William Shatner thing. And so I downloaded the audio, did all that, and then I would post the stuff on my personal website later Because Brother Ken was like, I don't care what you do with your Jiggy stuff. I don't care. So then I got a hold of an agent one time, and I said, hey, I want to interview Dean Koontz. And they're like, well, because he had a book tour or something. And they said, well, who have you done? And I said, William Shatner. And I sent them the clip, and they were like, well, let's do it.
That's also the sad thing that you realize is that every publicist says, well, who else have you been on? It's like, no, you know what? How about you just judge me on my own merits?
That too.
It's so frustrating. So, like, we on SDR, when we got Mark Cuban to come in studio, right, and spend an hour with us, and he was cursing, and he said, F Richard Branson. It was a really great, it was really funny. It was a great interview. Super nice guy. But then all I did was take the picture of me and Mark Cuban, and I sent it to everybody that said no to me that year and said, if it's good enough for Cubes, it should be good enough for you.
That's
and
awesome.
The amount of people that said, you know what, you're right, and they rescheduled and came back in and did the show. But that shouldn't have to happen.
No.
It should. I listen to your show, you're funny or you're good, let's do it.
Yeah. We do a lot of political stuff, and I'll have some of the wackiest, craziest political people on. But I get a lot of people based upon the fact that we had like Dr. Jerome Corsi on, and they're like, oh, that guy? Okay, I'll come on.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that way. It bothers me that it's that. I understand it because especially in this landscape where there's a million shows now, everybody has a podcast.
Oh, yeah, everybody.
Or whatever. So I understand it, but it should just be, how many listeners do you have? Okay, let me hear 5 minutes. Okay, I'll do it. That's what it should be. But that's just, I'm dreaming that would happen. But it would make my life so much easier instead of having to, like, really sugarcoat it, show them, oh, we had Papa Roach come in, we had Mark Cuban come in, we had this one, Dan Cook, and blah, blah, blah. And then finally get someone to say yes.
Yeah. Well, I ended up interviewing Eddie Money years and years ago. And we got that based upon because I'd done some with the Blue Goat stuff in Salina. We interviewed every single band that came through town. I didn't care if they were a local band, regional band, national band, whatever. I tried to interview everybody who came through the door. And I sent our YouTube channel one time because Eddie Money was going to be performing at some event somewhere, and I wanted to interview Eddie Money. So I sent him the YouTube link. And they're like, you haven't interviewed anybody that's a big deal, but you've interviewed, like, from what it looks like, you've interviewed 30 people in 1 week. Because we were at the Blue Goat every night, and they had 3 bands or 4 bands every night. And so that's how I got Eddie Money. And so when we started, my buddy Michael Nagy, who's out there in New Jersey, he started to want to do interviews. And I said, dude, just go interview every single damn person you get your hands on. It's numbers. I tell that to
people all the time because you need to get to a point where you're comfortable doing an interview. And I think that the only thing that comes from is repetition.
Yes. Well, Ralph, this has been fun. I definitely want to do this again because you are amazing. This has definitely been an honor and a privilege.
Is that Ric Flair on your counter over there?
I believe so. I got
Is it likeness over your right shoulder? Is that who I'm looking at?
I think so. I've got all sorts of different things. I've got Bubba the Love Sponge up here somewhere. I'm a big radio mark. I'm a big wrestling mark. And as my girlfriend likes to say, I'm just a big mark. I'm a mark for everything.
I'm looking at a law book as well. Is that what I see? A big law book?
Yes, I think we just had an interview with him a couple weeks ago.
Oh, okay. I like it's like a little peering into your life, sir.
Yes. Well, this is good. Well, I definitely want to stay in touch, and I will hit you up on Skype here in just a few. And thanks for doing this. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you very much for having me, buddy.
Thank you, sir. There he goes, Ralph Sutton, and we are going to take a quick time out. When we come back, we're going to be chatting with someone else.